Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the way that Suella Braverman has incited far-right thugs to clash with police and desecrate the Cenotaph, and yet the right-wing commentators are somehow trying to suggest that it vindicates her warnings and blaming the people who were marching miles away. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So Braverman warned of trouble at the Cenotaph, and we got trouble at the Cenotaph. I'm vindicated, she's presumably planning on saying. I can't say what she said at the moment. I'm having to record this a bit in advance because we're going out. Now, but this would be like a bank robber, wouldn't it? Announcing that a bank's going to get robbed, then robbing the bank and then saying, I told you it was going to get robbed. I am fully vindicated. Thank you very much. I mean, look at this. When the far right were throwing around their warnings of trouble for this Saturday, are these the people they were warning us about? No, the people they were warning us about were nowhere to be seen. Not unless you shifted your cameras miles, literal miles in the other direction. I think the closest the Palestinian march ever got to the Cenotaph was about 1.5 miles. And that was as the crow flies several hours after the Armistice Day event. That was it. That was the closest point. If you spent all day at the Cenotaph, you'd have never seen the march. You'd have not heard of it. You'd have seen the fascist. You'd have heard them. You'd have heard their chants. You'd have seen the fighting with police. Where was the condemnation for them? The BBC ran an article. The headline was, Police brace for largest pro-Palestinian protest and impose Cenotaph exclusion zone. Absolutely disgusting reporting to put those two statements in the same headline, even article. It's like, yes, there was a major police operation for the Palestinian march. Huge numbers were expected to be there. Of course, there'll be a lot of police there, just like there'll be for every march on any particular day. It's worth pointing out as well that the Armistice, there was an exclusion zone around the Cenotaph for the Armistice again. So both those things happened. But the two events were not linked. The Palestinian march was never going anywhere near the Cenotaph. The protection for the Cenotaph was against the far-right thugs that Braverman tried to unleash and succeeded. And I don't know what the front pages of the right-wing newspapers are going to look like tomorrow. But I'll tell you what I'm confident they're not going to look like. They're not going to tell how a fascist Home Secretary wrote a fascist article in which she urged fascist thugs to come to London in order to mob the Cenotaph, and how they did so, clashing with police, intimidating members of the public, and how that same fascist Home Secretary should be immediately dismissed. I do not need to wait for tomorrow to know that this is not how they'll be reporting it. The shameful events at the Cenotaph today are not vindicating Braverman, they should be castigating her. And to think, in Braverman's incendiary article, she had the nerve to say that the police cracked down on right-wing protests and turn a blind eye to the left. Here were right-wing protesters, although what they were protesting at I do not know. Peaceful and dignified armistice commemorations as far as I could tell. Here were right-wing protesters defying the police exclusion zone and seemingly getting away with it. Braverman should have been immediately sacked. What she was warning against did not transpire. Instead, what the rest of us warned about did. Instead, we get the news that Sunak won't really be sacking her, at least not before a reshuffle. You know, this isn't just weak from the Tory leader and Prime Minister. It's not just that it utterly destroys his claims of accountability, integrity and professionalism. It's that it says to the public, this is what the Tory party are. When far-right thugs clash with police, we're not on the side of the police. That's who the Tories are. Doesn't matter what they used to be. Doesn't matter what some people think that, well, deep down they still are. The Tories have made a stand this weekend. And it's not with law and order or respect for veterans. I'll tell you what you didn't see. You didn't see any veterans marching with Tommy Robinson, did you? There were veterans marching for Palestine, for peace in the Middle East. Not with the thugs. In a functioning society, Braverman and the editor responsible for publishing her article would be arrested for incitement to riot. Instead, Braverman is in charge of our Homeland Security, and that editor will publish another piece about how the disgraceful scenes at the Cenotaph were actually all the fault of people who were miles away, alongside actual veterans. miles away to the south and the west of the most famous war memorial in this country. As for the official reaction, did the government denounce these thugs? Well, at the point at which I'm having to record this, no. If a single Palestinian flag had got within 100 yards of that memorial, it would have been instant. They would have been baying from the rooftops. Load of Tommy Robinson thugs, not a murmur. Except, of course, for a few still trying to blame the people marching 2 miles away. And finally, I must say this. It is a disgrace how the mainstream media, including The Guardian, not just the usual suspects, have described the far-right thugs as counter-protesters. They were objectively not counter-protesters. A counter-protester is someone that takes an opposite stance to a scheduled protest. Like, for example, you may get some people who are going to organise an anti-ULEZ protest in London. And you may go, well, I'm in favour of it, so I will go along with my banners in support of ULEZ. That's a counter-protest. These thugs were not holding banners saying no to a ceasefire or anything. They just mobbed the Cenotaph. What was the counter-protest? Show me a single sign or chant that was specifically countering anything that the Palestinian March was doing. They weren't. They weren't counter-protesters, they were just protesters. But the media didn't want to call them that because then they'd have to say what they were protesting against. And what they were protesting against was, as I say, peaceful reflection on the tragedy of human lives being lost in the madness of war. And I hope I'm wrong about how this is actually going to be spun in the media. I hope it dawns on people that the Armistice Day commemoration was not impacted in the slightest by the Palestinian March. In fact, if the media hadn't drawn attention to it, as they often do for marches they're not interested in, including the last one I went to, then almost nobody would have even been aware it was taking place. You know, and I hope people see that. I hope they see images of this gentleman at the Palestinian March. I hope they see the disgraceful scenes near the Cenotaph. I hope people see how the two different groups really behaved. And I hope that most of the media have the decency to show it. But decades of observing British news reporting has made me somewhat cynical. They are going to go, or they will have done by the time this video comes out, I've no doubt. They're going to go to extreme lengths to find the isolated group of arseholes in the Palestinian March, and they will find them, the useful idiots, and they'll amplify them as if that's everyone there. In their search, they will find many more messages of universal peace. They won't report on those. And they will, where they even acknowledge the disruption at the Cenotaph at all, simply make excuses. All this week, they've talked about how disrespectful it would be to protest at the Cenotaph today. So why aren't they calling out the only protest which actually took place at the Cenotaph today? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.